Parshat Behar Bechukotai. It's a double Torah portion that ends the book of Vayikra, ends the book of Leviticus. And the first two verses of the Parsha sound innocuous, but they actually hold a lot of meaning. So let me read them in Hebrew and in English, and then share a little reflection, and then we'll start our days. The first two verses in Hebrew are Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe Behar Sinai Lemor Daber el Bnei Israel v'amart alehem ki tavo el haaretz asher ani noten lachem v'shavta haaretz Shabbat ladonai. Here's a translation. God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people, say to them, when you enter the land that I assign you, the land shall observe a Sabbath of God." So let's talk about the pshat, the contextual meaning of these verses, but then I'm going to make a comment about them. Shemitah is the Hebrew term for the seventh year, where we are commanded to let the land lie fallow. We don't cultivate the land for commercial use. This only applies in the land of Israel, but could be a model for what it is to pay attention to the earth and not over-farm it, not factory farm it until we drain it of all its nutrients and fertility. The earth itself is vulnerable, and the language for how to treat the earth on the seventh year is a mirror of how the Torah instructs us to treat ourselves during the seventh day. The name of our seventh day is Shabbat, a Sabbath, a rest. The name of the Shemitah year in this verse is Shabbat. The earth gets a Shabbat every 7 years. And so for us to pay attention to the vulnerable earth and to treat its fragile heart as we would treat our own human ones is an important lesson to derive from this week's Parsha. There's much written about how to observe Shemitah. It only pertains to the land of Israel and actually during the time of the temple. And so many believe that Shemitah itself doesn't quite apply in the modern state, but there are those who believe that it does. And during the Shemitah year, in the state of Israel, you will see certain foods stamped with not grown on Israeli soil during Shemitah, for those who pay close attention to it. But there's something interesting to note from the first verse too, which is that God gave this command at Mount Sinai. Now, we're closing the book of Leviticus, but remember back with me to the middle of the book of Exodus, Shmot. When we receive the Torah on Mount Sinai, there is no mention of Shemitah. There are the 10 commandments. They aren't actually more important than the other commandments, but they were singularly given, or tenfully given, on Mount Sinai. So when the verse begins, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe Behar Sinai Lemor, God gave this rule on Har Sinai. Listen to Rashi's question, a famous Torah commentator. My inyan Shemitah etzel Har Sinai. What has the matter of the sabbatical year to do with Mount Sinai? Because it didn't happen then. I want you to hear some of Rashi's comment here. Weren't all the commandments given on Sinai? Why specify that? That's one side of it. The other side of it is 10 commandments were given on Sinai, not the other ones. So he says, this statement is intended to suggest the following comparison. How is it in the case of law and Shemitah? Its general rule and minute details were ordained on Mount Sinai. So also were all commandments with their general rules and their minute details ordained on Mount Sinai. Sometimes we have new questions that arise, given the use of technology, the ethics of cloning, all sorts of questions that pertain to our world that our ancestors could never have envisioned. During the pandemic, some of us who never used electricity or digital interfaces on Shabbat suddenly were forced to confront the possibility of doing that and had to recognize, as I did personally, that this can be a sacred portal. That finding each other, however we had to, was a fulfillment of the laws that we received during biblical times, even though the Torah could never have envisioned what it is to use this kind of technology. What must it feel like to be the recipient of this rule? God said this at Sinai. If you were a witness to what God actually said, there are things that feel like they weren't included. They couldn't have been precipitated. They couldn't have been understood. And yet we believe that the cardinal rules offered at Sinai hold it all. What is it to say, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am the Lord your God, asher hotzeticha me'eretz Mitzrayim, who took you out of the land of Egypt. What is it to apply such an understanding today, if not to understand that to live a sacred life is to see people in systems of oppression and to say, you should not be oppressed. You are an image of the one God, and you have no less right to life and dignity than me. What is it to see the rule, don't have a graven image today? Could the Torah have understood in advance that there would be weapons of mass destruction that would be idolized, fetishized, worshipped, so much so that the images of God, human beings, would be considered less a priority than the freedom to use an automatic rifle in America? One by one, these rules, the Ten Commandments, can be understood to include the whole thing. Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadsho. Observe and remember Shabbat and keep it holy. Could our ancestors have imagined what it was during a pandemic to figure out how to keep Shabbat and be holy, live connected lives? What is it to understand intellectual property, if not to apply the rules of jealousy and vanity, to wish to be just like someone else? The 10 rules include it all. So when we look at the rules of Shemitah, I want to imagine that what we have in front of us is a system of ethical and ritual laws that are meant to be applied with imagination, with courage, with open-heartedness, because the circumstances of the world may change, but the mandate to make it a holy place does not. In every generation, we are called to reapply the principal rules, to know that what we received at Sinai was a divine mandate to do good and be kind, to take care of our earth and our neighbors. So, as Rabbi Cantor Risa writes, we were getting a little closer to the promised land, therefore God felt we were ready to have this mitzvah specified? Sure. As our history continues to unfold, as we continue to write it, maybe more becomes revealed so that we can apply it with health and love and kindness as we continue to understand and develop more. Think about the way that we collect our groceries now, not in plastic bags. That might not sound like it was a rule given at Sinai, but if you recognize that the way that you are doing something is degrading God's creation, shouldn't you think twice about how you do it the next time? May we be blessed to really take in the language of this parsha, to understand that it was all given at Sinai. As Franz Rosenzweig, a famous German Jewish philosopher, said, what was revealed at Sinai wasn't the content of the covenant, but the relationship of the covenant. We are meant to be partners with God in the acts of creation. Let's make sure that as we come to understand more, as maybe we get closer to the promised land, one step at a time. And by that I don't mean a plot of land. I mean to an earth that feels like it is full of promise once more. May we take our responsibilities seriously, to look back to Sinai for the general idea and flesh out the details, because that's how much we love each other and this beautiful, fragile planet we call home. So bless you, friends. Let's have a good day. Let's see what Sinai teaches us today. Bless you, friends. See you tomorrow.